Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of this planning committee. Firstly, I will call upon the clerk who will advise how the meeting will be run this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees present in person refrain from watching the live stream or joining the Zoom link, as this will cause interference for our viewers. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chairman. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. Please ensure that your mobile phone and iPads are turned to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The Planning Officer will present the submitted application. At the end of the Planning Officer's presentation, the Planning Officer will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the Planning Officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chairman will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chairman will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. The Chairman will then confirm with the Planning Officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting to the Chairman, Councillor Pentney.
Thank you. And can the clerk advise on the updated composition of tonight's committee, please?
Chairman, I wish to report with the wishes of the independent group, Councillor Brown is substituting for Councillor Manning.
Thank you. And Councillor Dart was expected but clearly is absent. In which case we'll move on to minutes to confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 13th of February 2023. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Dudley to propose and a seconder. Councillor Hill to second. All those in favour, please indicate. So those minutes are carried. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. No hands raised. Likewise, same question but for officers. Okay. I'm not aware of any urgent items from either governance or the senior officer, so we'll move to the first application of this evening, which is the land to the south of White Rock, Inglewood, P 2022 119. Jean Magnan, could you please give your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. This application is numbered P 2022/1119. This is a reserved matters application for the site known as Inglewood, which is south of White Rock in Paynton. The site is 31 hectares, located on the west side of Brixham Road and south of White Rock. It has outline planning permission for 373 residential units, a school and a pub/restaurant, which the permission that's being implemented is reference number P 2022/0112, and that is a Section 73 variation on the outline permission that was granted on appeal by the Planning Inspectorate. That's just for clarity. It has outline planning permission for 373 residential units, a school and a pub/restaurant, which site and the environment around. The permission that's being implemented is reference number P new housing development. Steed Close, which is a more established area, and down here, agricultural land on the around the outside, which is part arable part cattle grazing. That's just for clarity.
And
It has outline planning permission for
a new wood and walk
373
area up
residential
here
units,
tree
as an
planting
aerial
and
one
this
pub
area.
stroke restaurant.
The actual
The site
this
and the
triangle is also
environment
part of the
permission that's being
application site,
implemented
and so
is
it's
restaurants
moved
here,
P
through
through
housing
here
development,
into the Inglewood site.
Steed Close, which is a more established
012,
area, and down here,
section 73
agricultural
variation.
land
on the
around the
outline
outside,
permission,
which is so
part
closing
RP
in
part
on what is the
planning.
actual development area. This is a north part where there's already been some orchard planting. There's proposed allotments, and this is the first area called Orchards, which would be developed. We'll come on to a plan for the layout in a minute. This is also an area for housing. And the school will be there, and this is also for housing. At present, or recently, the site looked like this from Brixham Road. You won't have been able to see that for a while because the road's been closed for the highway works. Running down to the layout, the reserved matters application is intended through conditions on the outline application. Seek approval for details of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. This is the indicative layout that was approved at outline permission, which the RM's are required to accord with. The features are the access roundabout here, the loop road, which runs around the site, 4 distinct areas of residential character, open space provisions, and identifies land for a school, and this is the land for the pub. And this is what has been submitted under the reserved matters application, so you can see that the layout complies with what was required from the outline permission. It relates to residential open space and movements, i.e. roads and paths. It does not include details of what's going to go on the school land or on this site. It doesn't include details of the public highway either. Those have been dealt with in detail at the outline stage. The layouts are in accordance with the Urban Design Regulatory Plan and all located and positioned as they were in that document. The outline required submission of a phasing plan because it's a large development. See how the site was going to be built out, and this is what has been submitted. So the yellow roads and routes, that's a cycle footpath, are all to be built as part of a first phase, and at the same time or fairly soon after, phase 1 of the housing is in this northern area, which is referred to as Orchards. That would be in 2023, 24. The blue area would be known as Walks, is the next phase for development. A purple area, this one down here is called Nords, and this is part of the wider area called Quarry's Edge. And then the final phase, phase 4, would be this part of Quarry's Edge. So the implementation would run from 2023 to 2027. There's a few details I wanted to add to a commentary on what's supposed to be submitted with the reserved matters. The outline permission also required the following matters to be submitted: sustainable construction, phasing, which I've just run through, the details of the play areas, a landscape environment management plan, bus stop infrastructure, which highways were adoptable, electric vehicle charging points, bin stores, cycle stores, and identification of the school land. So those are the items that need to be considered as part of the reserved matters application. All the other matters are either subject for agreement before commencement of development or before occupation of each phase. So if you've got questions about the other aspects, they can be dealt with, but they're not part of consideration for this application, except the drainage where extra details have been submitted. Yes. Sustainable construction. Phasing. Details of the play areas. A LEMP, Landscape Environment Management Plan. Bus stop infrastructure. There's more. This is a substantial application with a lot of information submitted. So there's which highways are to be adopted. Charging points for electric vehicles. Bin storage. Cycle storage. And identification of the school land. We've also had submitted details of drainage for most of the first phase of the residential, which have been agreed by the drainage officer. So, what was requested was a bit more detail of the layout so that it was actually visible. So I've taken the liberty of putting in the detailed layouts. It's still quite small scale, but you can see where the roads run, where each house is, and where it's got a garden. Also, you can see where there are, as the allotments being divided up, a planting strip here, quite substantial amount of shrubbery going in. The play area for the first phase, which is this neighbourhood play area, it's a substantial one, and the all-surface all-weather multi-use games area. Okay, so that's the orchards area, which is in the north. It's on an upward sort of rising hill towards the north. Most of the properties are 2-storey, some of these are 3-storey. Each property has 2 parking spaces at least, and some have also a garage, and visitor parking is spread throughout the site. And here is part of the second phase. This is the north part of the second phase called the walks. It uses a structure of blocks, so there are about 6 blocks in the area, each with sort of gardens backing onto each other, which gives security to the properties and also gives an outward-facing form of development so that all the spaces around are naturally surveyed, which is quite important when you get down to the south here where the countryside access route is running through. That's one of the more dense areas, the walks, just to provide variety of streetscape and character, really. This is the area to the south, which is called Nords, gets its name from the large tree plantation just to the southwest of it. This has a more village feel with a kind of lane with an open space in the middle, cul-de-sacs and its own play area and informal kickabout area. This is the whole of the area called Quarry's Edge. I'm sorry, this has had to be a smaller scale because of the shape of it to make it fit on the slide. But this again is higher density and it has a higher proportion of 3-storey buildings. But again, in blocks, outward facing, with natural surveillance over the footpaths and the open spaces. And here's a tabulation of what's going on with the phasing. So first off, the roads, footpath and cycle paths are would be installed. Firstly, for the residential phase 1 is the orchards area, which has 76 units in it, 6 of which are affordable. The next phase, the walks area, has 131 units, 66 of which are affordable. That clustering is something which affordable housing providers tend to prefer. And affordable housing officers said this is a good offer. The Nords and Quarry Edge part that were highlighted in pink have 113 units in, and 16 of those are affordable. And down in in the remainder of the Quarry's Edge area, there are 53 units, 24 of which are affordable. And this final column identifies which public open space provisions are part of each of those phases. So that's felt to be a good offer. That is something that was not required by the outline permission, but was required through Section 106. So that's in accordance with the Section 106, so far up to date. Just an update on the highway. Sorry for the dragon sound effects. For the highway works that are ongoing, the site access roundabout is being constructed there, and the works to Brixham Road are at the stage of providing the final surfacing, and the blacktop is going on part of it as well. So that's due to be finished at the end of March for opening over Easter, and then partial traffic management after that to finish it off properly. So in terms of the scale, this map shows the building heights. The pink one's a single story, so that is really restricted to bungalows down in this area and most of the garages. The pale blue is 2-story, orange ones are 3-story, and the purple ones are 2.5. That is 2 stories with rooms in the roof. The taller buildings are in the centre, so they're clustered around the roundabout, the sort of spinal road down to the school, and up here on lower ground. This part of the site is lower than this part, so 3 stories here will be seen against the 2 stories that on land that is actually about a story higher. So the roofs of these buildings would not project above those. And this also, being 3 stories, would act as a screen to the higher level street lighting that is obliged to be implemented around the roundabout and on the A road. So that would be screening it from the AONB to the west to some extent. Okay. So around the edges, most of the housing would be 2-story. Here's an illustration of the house type and the materials that would be used. The top one is the orchards, and these are in stone, and the natural stone is used for the taller buildings, the reconstituted stone for the lower ones. I've got a materials palette that will be shown in a minute. Down in the walks area, there's this is the scene that you would see at the roundabout at the entrance to the site, again using stone to give that all important views in the view of the natural stone, whereas these ones within the walks area, this one facing the loop road, makes use of reconstituted stone, which has a good texture and a good colour for this area, and render. Now moving on to the Nords area, this is the village area at the bottom. Much more use of different coloured render and lower profile of buildings, because this is the area that's most visible from the south in the AONB. There's a large bund around the bottom of it with substantial tree planting on it as well, so the effect after a few years will be to screen it quite effectively. The roof colours are landscape colours. The grey and dark reddy brown of the site is reflected in those tiles. And on the quarry's edge, where it would be facing onto Brixham Road, there's a use of more urban styling with render cladding in timber, and also some use of the stone, but the materials are mixed to give you to break up the facades and make it look more varied. So the appearance is generally in accordance with the colour scheme of the landscaped the landscape around, which is the reddish-brown soil and the grey stone. This plan shows the materials, but it's got so many dots on it, and they're all slightly different colours. So I'll just explain with my pointer the significant elements. These buildings use the natural stone. These are the ones that will be visible from the AONB to the west and from Waterton Road. These buildings around here also use the natural stone. These are the ones that are really visible on the site entrance roundabout. Right, the pink circles are the retained and protected trees, so in case you're wondering what they are. Here on the lower part of the site, along this edge, it was noted by our landscape consultant that the buildings that were in off-white would be more visible from outside the site, and so the applicants have made the effort to change them to an earth tone. So that's a constructive amendment that's been made. And down here, there's a pink dot. There's a couple of buildings that come out pink. They're just reflecting what is the vernacular in Waterton Village. There's quite a lot of pink render down there. And as promised, here's the materials palette. So we've got black bricks and reddish-brown bricks. The reddish-brown bricks will go well with the landscape. This is the reconstituted stone called Old Heather. This is Yenadon stone. At the bottom here, I've got photographs of how Old Heather looks with Yenadon stone and how they're really quite complementary. Obviously, it depends on the mortar colour. This one's quite pale, but the recommendation is for sample panels to be constructed on site, and we'll be looking at the mortar colours there to blend in. These are the colours of the renders that have been chosen to blend in with the landscape. So these would be used for larger areas, and then there are small panels in these two stronger colours. And the roof colours, grey, red, brown and grey, suit the landscape. As I'll demonstrate in this slide, you can see the soil colour is really quite strong and does reflect the colour of that brick, the render colours and the Yenadon stone tones. This is actually a view from John Musgrave footpath, and the applicants have gone to the trouble of redoing the landscape visual impact assessment views. The top one is as it was around Christmas time or in the autumn. And this is the site. Here we have 10 years' time, where you can see the roofscape, but the hedgerow enhancement has grown so that the colours of the buildings are actually screened. And this bit in the north, it's the same, although this section would be more earthbound colours, as in the recent amendment to the materials proposals. This is the view from Dittisham across the way in the AONB. So this is Steed Close at present, and this is in 10 years' time when the hedgerow has grown up to screen the ground floor and much of the gable ending of the buildings on the west of the site. This is a view from the north edge of Galmpton Village. This is at present. Again, you can see Steed Close. And then in the future, in 10 years, when the hedgerows and enhanced planting have grown up, you can see the roofscape of Nords is really very well screened from this angle. A little bit of quarry edge is visible. And here it is from the west along Waterton Road. This is probably where it's most visible from, other than from Brixton Road. At the moment, fields, and in 10 years' time, when the hedgerows have grown up, although these will be more muted colours, they will be visible to some extent, but not in an intrusive way. and from Brixham Road. This was presumably just before Christmas, and the hedgerows, once the hedgerows have been taken down, and this is proposed for 10 years with a native hedgerow having grown well over 10 years, and the stone-coloured buildings down at the site access roundabout here showing up. So it's felt that the appearance has been really well handled by the applicants, and the consideration of materials has been very thorough. So the affordable housing element required by Section 106, here's a plan showing how it's spread out across the site in clusters in a manner that social providers are happy with. And the affordable housing officer has confirmed that that is the kind of clustering that's popular with the registered providers. There's 112 units altogether, and split 1/3 social rent, 1/3 affordable rent, and 1/3 intermediate. Whereas this slide shows typical floor plans of the adaptable units that are proposed. Now, the Section 106 required 5% of the social housing to be adaptable. So 5% of 112 units is 5 point something, so that rounds up to 6. So we're expecting 6 of the adaptable units to be social rent, and they are, in a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bed units, which is a very good offer. In addition, there are 13 other adaptable units amongst the social housing units, so that's a bonus of 13 adaptable units over and above what Section 106 required that are amongst the affordable housing provision. And that's, the details of that are in the update table that was circulated at the beginning of the weekend. And these are typical floor plans showing the wet room near to the door and the potential area for a separate bedroom if one of the residents wasn't able to get upstairs. That's in the 4-bed unit. It's a similar layout in the 3-bedroom unit. In the 2-bedroom unit, there is downstairs washing facilities and WC, with the wide doorways, etc., and potentially room for a bedroom downstairs, although that would limit the amount of communal space, but it's still a good offer. Okay. So then we come. What was required in the layout for public open space was very substantial. It includes allotments in the top corner there. The community orchard, 3 play areas, a trim trail, countryside access route which runs around the site here and joins up to the north side where it links with the northern access route, and a woodland walk that has been provided as part of the White Rock development. There are also informal pockets of open space, including this area. If we go on, so this is what was required in the outline permission, and this is what's provided in the submission. So you can see the layout is similar. All the expected public open space is provided. To some extent, this area has been enhanced because it's more private for the properties here, and it segregates the noise from of the bus stop from the frontage of those properties. And this area here has been changed from a sinkhole, it was a swale, which has the advantages for wildlife, but it can be quite dangerous for children playing. So the applicants have changed this to an attenuation tank underground and a flat playing area with retained trees instead. Apart from that, the layout is and provision of open space is in compliance with the outline permission. Here's a close-up of one of the play areas. This is the neighbourhood play area in the north, in the orchards area, which be provided as part of the first phase. Variety of equipment in this area, a seating area and a multi-use games area here. Details of the surfaces and fences can be secured through condition on this. And here's the bus stop infrastructure, which is required. Includes this area of screening with trees and planting and a hedge bank. It's a one-way system, so the buses would come in here, stop here and go out, whether they're going north or south. So it's one stop for both buses, which saves, it makes it simpler to do the layout. And there's a provision of a shelter. Details of that have just been submitted. Public Transport have confirmed that they'll provide the flag and that we can secure details of real-time information system through a condition. Okay, what else have I got? The public open space around the bus stop includes some trim trail activities, a hedge bank made of stone to screen the residential area, and a defensible landscape space for these apartments to use in addition to their own little amenity space and patio. So the open space provisions are in accordance with what was required. So it is, the site covers 2 of the neighbourhood plan areas. The very top triangle lies within the Paynton neighbourhood plan, but none of the housing is actually in that area. The majority of the site is in the area covered by the Brixham Peninsula neighbourhood plan, and these policies were relevant. I have run through the main points relevant to this reserved matters application. So the principle of development, I'll just recap, was approved through at the outline stage, as was the economic impact. The design impact and heritage assets were considered in depth by Planning Inspectorate, so that the details submitted under reserved matters comply in all respects with what's required at outline. Can assume there are no additional heritage impacts generated by the reserved matters application. The landscaping scheme, which I haven't shown details of, but is kind of implied in all those layout plans, has been considered in great detail. Each of the character areas has its own planting nature and character, which gives it a distinct feel. Substantial trees included all the way around the loop road and in most of the residential areas where there is adequate space for the canopies. Highways have agreed the adoption strategy, which includes some verges and street tree planting. They've agreed there's sufficient parking provided. Just wanted to see that they're secured through condition and that final details of the sockets for the electric charging points are submitted in a timely manner. There are no additional ecology and biodiversity implications that need to be submitted under the reserved matters. Some are being dealt with through further conditions on the outline application, including biodiversity habitat enhancement and bat boxes and bird boxes, etc. There's also an ecological mitigation strategy that's being developed at the moment, but that's also the subject of a separate discharge of conditions application, not for consideration tonight. On flood risk and drainage, that strictly speaking was supposed to be considered separately as another discharge of conditions application, but the applicants have requested that the drainage details for the first 62 units be approved tonight. Those have been submitted to our drainage engineer, and he has responded, and that's reported in the committee, that the first 62 units are, the drainage details are sufficient and acceptable, so they're approvable. So we get to the sustainable construction. The initial submission was a holding report, which has now been updated with a statement of intent. The problem was that building regulations changing whilst the application's been in, and the future, so there are new regulations for 2023, and there'll be further regulations in 2025. So as I've said, the phasing of the build is between 2023 to 2027. So that's going to cover new regulations, the details of which are still being set out by the company that's made this particular application, which operates on a nationwide scale. So it's a large operation for them to update their fabric first approach. They have submitted an amended statement of intent for sustainability and low carbon energy, which contains, I can flick down to the slide, which contains what the elements are, but principally it's to be compliant with those new building regs which improve energy efficiency by initially 30% and in 2025 by 75%. Also to provide an air source heat pump for each house, and that's a valuable offer, and to include solar panels where those are sort of visually and practicably possible. So if you've got a north-facing pitch, you really wouldn't want to put them on there. You'd want south-facing ones, but on the lower roofs, and the ones that aren't going to be glaringly obvious from the AONB. So that'll be a very delicate matter, and we'll need to be dealt with it phase by phase. I can give more detail if there are questions. What else have we got? Bin stores. We've had adequate details on where the bin stores will be, but we have a few details to work out where the collection points would be on collection day. There's adequate space on the site, so I'm suggesting that phase by phase those are dealt with through a discharge of conditions application. And the same for cycle stores, although that really is most important for the flats. The detail that's required relates to what sort of rack and the secure mechanism for locking bicycles in them. That is really quite a fine detail and is usually sought through condition rather than at application stage. In terms of designing out crime, I've recommended a condition for a strategy or scheme. A police consultation response was highlighting the apartment blocks needing secure entry systems, and so that's what that will focus on. The application does identify the site for the school land, and there's a school bus lay-by, and pedestrian access from the east and the west is included in the site layout. So those are all the issues that were due to be submitted with the reserved matters application, and they've been adequately addressed. The Section 106 is being complied with. Where we haven't got final details, they may be such as the sustainable construction. There is the strategic parameters set out which would make it policy compliant. And so far, the entirety of the scheme is considered to be policy compliant in those areas where the details were required to be submitted. And where we have subject to recommended conditions seeking details by phase, and also conditions that seek effective implementation beyond what was possible for the original outline permission to specify. Therefore, I move on to the Officer recommendation, which is that planning conditions outlined in the report, that the application is approved subject to the planning conditions outlined in the report, with final drafting of those conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary planning conditions or obligations. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, June. Before we move to public speakers, I'm just going to invite Mr. Edmondson in to talk briefly about the portal outage that members will be aware of over the weekend.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and apologies to members, particularly. I know Councillor Hill, Councillor Mr Thomas and Karen Kennedy raised this morning at our virtual site visit. I wanted to make an apology really on the fact that the portal was down for 2 days over last weekend and 2 days over this weekend. and that I know you've been away, and so there's been a difficulty in terms of being able to look at this. But we always want that ability for you to be able to research information further than just the officer report. I have to say, June's very thorough report this time and thorough presentation will, I hope, have given you sufficient information to be able to make those decisions. I've had a confirmation this morning from the Director of Corporate Services just saying that is fixed. There was some unsupported software that they'd had to delay sorting out. They'd created a fix for it, which had an automated sort of requirement that instantly brought it back upon failure, but apparently that had been working well until mid-February when the password update meant that that the team weren't aware of it at weekends, that it had gone down. So they've now created some further fix for that, and it won't go down at weekends, I am assured, but apologies for that. And I'm very impressed that members are doing good research outside of the main committee report. It is June and Scott and my job to try and summarise and put those within reports to give you as much information, but I do recognise that you want to do your own research as well and look at reports and things. So apologies for the fact that they were down over the last 2 weekends, and we are getting it sorted. So thank you.
Councillor Mills, very quickly, because I want to keep the structure of the meeting intact. And we're on to speakers first before questions. Yes. So, firstly, so we'll move to public speakers. So I'm going to invite Mr. Alistair MacDonald of Blue Fox Planning to address the committee in support of the application. So welcome, Mr. MacDonald. You will have a total of 5 minutes to address the committee. We'll prompt you when you've got 1 minute remaining of those 5 minutes, but otherwise make a start when you're ready to do so, please.
Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm always a bit suspicious of microphones, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Councillor Mills, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name's Alistair MacDonald, as you've just heard. I'm the agent on behalf of Persimmon Homes for the Reserved Matters application at Inglewood that's before you tonight. Behind me is my client, Eve, from Persimmon Homes. We're really very pleased to be here tonight. It marks, in our opinion, the culmination of well over a year's hard work by many people, including your officers, but work that has been rewarding in being able to present to you tonight what we believe is a high-quality scheme. Likewise, we're obviously pleased to see the recommendation for approval and the extremely detailed report prepared by Ms Padgett, which I think is reflective of the level and detail that we've gone into in preparing the Reserved Matters application that's before you. As has already been mentioned, but I think it bears me mentioning it again, this site already has the benefit of outline planning consent, so the principle of development has been established. That outline consent was granted prior to my client's involvement in the site, and whilst in outline it did, as you've already heard, set out some key parameters and aspirations for the delivery of the site in the reserved matter stage. We've worked really hard with your officers and others to get to a position where, sat here before you today, I believe that we do adhere with the parameters set out and aspirations of the outline. And in fact, I genuinely believe we go beyond those parameters and aspirations and improve on where the outline was at. This has been achieved in various ways, or because of various measures. We engaged in extensive pre-application discussions with your officers and advisors before we prepared and submitted the Reserved Matters application, so that we were well aware, or as aware as we possibly could be, of any of the issues and matters that needed to be addressed as part of the Reserved Matters application. We presented our evolving proposals to the design review panel, received their comments back, and again that's covered in the committee report before you. And we also consulted the local community, including a public engagement event in August last year, which was very well attended. And we're grateful for everybody who gave feedback at that event. At the time, Joe was going to meet with us, listen to what we had to say to make their comments and views known, both at the event in writing afterwards, and also through the consultation website we set up. And the outcome, as you've just heard, is that we are pleased to present to you a reserve mass application for 373 much-needed new homes. 112 of those are affordable. The mix, tenure and distribution of those across the site have been discussed with and agreed by your housing officers. Also, as you've already heard, there's significant amounts of open space, new play areas, allotments, public transport facilities, and also the facilitation of the delivery of a new primary school and nursery in the future as per the outline consent. In terms of detail, an example of the level of detail we've gone into reflects drainage. We know that's a local issue here. We know it's an issue in many, many places. The drainage strategy presented to you has been subject to an immense amount of testing and modelling. We've had extensive discussions with your drainage and flood officer, and as part of those discussions he has requested a lot more.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. A lot more information, including additional testing and modelling, all of which has been provided, and now gets us in a position where I'm pleased to say that he agrees that the drainage strategy that we will deliver will work. That's one example. Chair, you'll appreciate in a scheme like this, I haven't got time to run through every facet, but you've had a very comprehensive presentation by Ms. Paget. In conclusion, because I'm probably nearly out of time, thank you again for the opportunity to address you. We very much hope you feel able to support the recommendation and the proposals before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacDonald. Members, we now move to questions for the planning officer. So obviously please raise your hand. I've already got Councillor Mills first. Yes, please do return to the public gallery. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start question time with Councillor Mills first, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm quite happy to have my knuckles wrapped if I am not dealing with the right area within reserved matters. The Affordable Housing Officer's statement said that he was generally comfortable with the clustering of the affordable units across the site, but they may be better suited across 2 distinct blocks. However, if effective management arrangements are in place, then 1 block would be acceptable. Can I ask about this effective management? Who will be responsible for getting this effective management in place so that the 1 block does work?
Is this the comment in his response in the committee report? Yes. Okay.
I'm going to jump in while June's just looking for that, just to say that when a registered provider is identified that we'd be running the site, hopefully one of our local ones that operate within the bay, it's their responsibility in terms of the management of those units and the maintenance and repairs and liaison with tenants and things within there. So it would fall under their responsibility. And we do have a very close working relationship with all of the registered providers locally. So we'd be making sure that they keep up with that maintenance and work on the site.
Yes, I remember now. I emailed him to ask if he wanted that to be a condition, and he said, no, that's something we deal with directly with the registered provider.
Okay, thank you. I've got a few more. Is that all right? Carry on. The low carbon section, there's new building regulations coming in, and it says that any building that's not commenced before the 15th of June must comply with the new regulations. It says air source heat pumps to supply all dwellings with space. Can you explain a little bit how much space would be needed and how many properties would that actually be able to cover? That's page 38 of the report.
Surprised how long my report is, sorry.
I just wondered how much space does an air pump need?
Oh, an air source heat pump. They're different from ground source heat pumps, which take up quite a lot of ground. and you have to dig it all up. An air source heat pump is basically a box about the size of an air conditioning unit on the outside of your building. So I would say about 1.2 metres high and 1.5 metres wide and about that deep. I've looked into getting one. Yeah. So they would fit sort of where you've, behind a house.
So in actual fact, you reckon that the majority of the development will be large enough to have this air source heat pump?
Yes, I think that's right. The houses each have a little garden area, and an area of the patio is ideal for putting an air source heat pump on, especially if it's near where the hot water system is inside.
I've got another question, is that right? You've talked about the play areas, the mugger, maintain a good and safe condition thereafter, the completion of the play area, repair and replacement of equipment, who does that? Who will look after the trim trail? The allotments, we have a history of allotments being down on plans and then they're not actually happening. Who will be responsible for maintaining these areas after they're completed? The benches, bus shelters, who will be maintaining those? Because a mugger or a play area is expensive to maintain.
I see, yes. Thank you for that question. That's a good one. Where the land is being adopted, there are road adoption plans submitted, and Highways have seen them and agreed that they are good. They will be maintaining. What they usually do through Section 38 is ask for a commuted amount, which will help for maintenance. Where they're not adopted by Highways, at the moment, all the public open space, according to Section 106, will be managed by a management entity for the site, which is to be set up at an early stage of the development. That had to be the position because it was decided on appeal. I'm just anticipating that if you're in an appeal situation, the council's not going to offer to adopt the land when it's already not wanting to have approved the application. So the planning inspector had to, the securing of any management and maintenance of any open space would have had to have been through a management entity set up. There's potential for it to be adopted by the council. Certainly the LEMP mentions that, but as that's not a discussion that is really part of the reserved matters application, it would be through a variation of the Section 106.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Councillor Barbara Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing in the report for the start dates or the completion dates of the public house stroke restaurant or the school. Can you shed any light on that, please?
I can shed light on the school, which is due to be offered to Torquay Council on occupation of the 150th dwelling. In the Section 106 it was 75th, but the TDA, an education department, requested that that be put back to assist with funding bids, to have sufficient households and with children in to make the bid viable.
The school,
yes.
basically, yeah.
Yes.
So it's, you've got to have 150 houses before dwellings. Does that include the flats then?
Includes the flats,
it includes
yes.
the flats as well.
Yes, so
Okay.
they need to be
The
occupied.
public house stroke restaurant?
We haven't got any details at the moment, so no, I can't advise.
Okay. Just one more. The electric charging points, for the flats, there's 24 spaces, car parking spaces, and only 5 charging points. And I know the regulation is 20% for that. And there's only 6 6 spaces with 2 points for the other flats. You know, is there any chance that they could put more charging points in with the way things are going? I know electricity's gone up, but you know, there's going to be more electric cars on the road, which is going to need more charging points.
Not, it's possible. It could happen in the future, but those shared charging points would be the parking for the affordable housing. So it would be the registered provider.
Just all of the flats are the affordable?
Yes.
Oh, they are? Okay.
They are. So presumably the parking for those flats would be part of the deal with the registered providers. So it would be something for them to consider. But we wouldn't say no, but it hasn't been proffered at this stage.
So
but the 20% is in compliance with our
yes, I know,
standards, yeah.
I've told that so many times.
Have you?
So every house will have their own charging point?
Yes.
They will?
They'll have their own cabling. We've had a plan showing where the cabling and the points would be, but the details of the charging sockets still to be sorted because that's an emerging technology.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you very much, June, because I know you've put an awful lot of work into the detail on this. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm going to apologise for my questions because I was impacted by the lack of portals. So the answers to my questions probably are on here somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it. So bear with me, if you don't mind. I've got a few questions. With regard to, you talked about the changes in building regs and the sustainable construction. So is the statement of intent, am I right in saying, is that the document from the 16th of February with which talks about...
copied and pasted. Yeah.
Sorry?
It's up there now. I've
It
copied
says
it and
the
pasted it and it's up on the screen.
Sorry?
I've copied and pasted it so it's up on the screen because I was aware that that the members hadn't been able to see it over the weekend. So there it is in
I think
all
that might
its
be the
glory.
one. It looks similar. So with the first phase and what we know the law or the regulations to be at the moment, do we have any detail as to those the first phase housings, which ones will have what do you call it? Those things on top of the roofs.
Panels, solar panels.
It's solar panels. Thank you. Which ones will have air source heat pumps? Because I see from this statement that where possible, these different items. Do we know any detail on the first phase?
The only detail we know is if they start after the 15th of June with at below ground level foundation, they'll need to comply with those new building regs. They will have an air source heat pump. They may have a solar panel. That is something that's subject of a condition, sorting out solar panels. In fact, it's a condition to have an approach for each phase. And as part of each phase, solar panels will be the chief consideration, really. I haven't put in a required standard, but because the policies support it, but don't set a requirement.
Sorry, maybe if I misunderstood. Have they told, because the first phase is about to be started?
Yeah.
Once the if we approve,
Yeah.
have they given us told us exactly what's going in to the first phase? Have they given us those? No. Okay.
No, that's to be secured through condition 8. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sorry, the next one is to do with the trees. So I haven't been able to see about TPOs, the tree protection plan and the method statement. So there's a number of trees being planted. How are we going to put a blanket TPO on the site? Or if you can give me some idea of how we're going to be managing that side of things.
Okay. They're in the open space, largely. Well, there's trees in the streets and then there are trees in the open spaces. So they'll come under the management of whoever's managing that particular space. The adopted roads, where there are trees, they'll be managed by the council. Where they're in the public open space, they'll be managed by the management entity. Until, or if that's changed, it will be whoever's responsible for managing them. I haven't proposed to put a TPO on them. They're not planted yet. There is always a requirement to replace any that are lost in the first 5 years. But the LEMP, the recommendation regarding the LEMP asks for a 15-year review to see whether the trees that have been planted are achieving the landscape screening and overall landscape impact that was intended. That was recommended by a landscape consultant. So if they've been badly affected or bumped into or lost or diseased, they'd be assessed and any necessary replacements or enhancements would be sought through that condition. So that's why that condition is on there. There was something else I was going to say.
Can we make that period shorter? 15 years does seem rather a long time. Trees establish a little bit shorter than that. Can we do a check before that? Can we ask for the review date to come forward?
Well, 5 years is the checking anyway after it's been planted. So that's a standard sort of landscape implementation requirement that if any are lost or damaged or diseased within 5 years, they're replaced, full stop. So there will be one after 5 years and then the LEMP review after 15 years.
Sorry, I just understood the 15. I've missed the 5 years.
That's
okay.
Details.
I have a couple more if that's okay. With regard to, because we're right next to the AOMB, so when the houses are sold or rented, is there going to be conditions in the put into the the deeds about the paint palette for the external? We don't want anything bright right up against the AOMB. Plus also to do with lighting because of it being in a Greater Horseshoe Bat area. So is there going to be conditions placed on future homeowners as to lighting and external colouring?
I'm going to jump in while June's looking through, but condition 27, yes, refers to the ability for the local authority, and we've recommended it to take away the permitted development rights for a number of the properties, and that's to prevent green conservatories being added on or additions being made without needing the requirement of a planning permission. So it's unusual for us to do that, but because it's such a sensitive site, we felt that was necessary to do that. So it's effectively taking away that property owner's right to make alterations to it because of the sensitivity of that. So condition 27 doesn't specifically refer to the painting of the external side of the property, but it's quite a strict one, but we could add that as a wording within that condition along with the conservatories and extensions.
Yeah. And external lighting. I know that is done because it has been done in Churston, where it's in a bat area, so we need to put a condition in, please, about external lighting and the paint palettes in addition. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Brown and Councillor Mills. Councillor Brown, your question, please.
Yes. With these houses, are you catering for disabled people regarding the plans for development, furnishing them for their needs?
Okay. The schedule for the... Oh, that's impossible to read. The schedule for the adaptable... That's what adaptable
right,
is.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the 19 units are all in the affordable brackets. So that's for people who are least able and can least afford to adapt a property for themselves. So the 19 units are spread across the different house types and across the different house sizes. The circulated update identified the tenure mix and the unit size for adaptable units. In the private market housing, there haven't been adaptable units specified. I think the weight given to the affordable units is quite a significant one, and is probably preferable than to actually specifying adaptable units in the private sector, because those people are so much less able to adapt a property for themselves. But if you own a house, you have the right to make adaptations inside it, and you could make adaptations. I think generally the layouts are fairly similar to those that are adaptable, and many of them have downstairs WCs. The larger units certainly have rooms that could become downstairs bedrooms, but they're not specified.
Only I did hear you say that some of the doors were wider. So if someone's got a wheelchair, you would have to have a wider door, wouldn't you? When the houses are being built, that's what I'm saying.
Yes,
So,
I think the average wheelchair is about 85 centimetres wide, including knuckles. So that's the width you need to get a wheelchair through. And that does tend to be standard these days. Certainly, I could get my dad into my house through the front door. But certainly you could get around the house. The adaptable unit's obviously made for much easier manoeuvrability, and for somebody to actually live there. But most houses these days are constructed so that you can get in and visit, even if you don't stay there. And many do have downstairs WCs provided in the schedules and the house design booklets, which are
okay,
quite thorough to go through them all, actually. But there's capacity for the market housing to be used by people who are in wheelchairs as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Mills, please. And Councillor Brown, could you switch off your microphone, please? Thank you.
You mentioned that there's going to be a Toucan crossing on the Loop Road. Yes, 2324. Can you show me where it is on the Loop Road? Have you any idea on the map where the Toucan crossing is going to be?
It's not on the. There's not a Toucan on the Loop Road.
It says it's going to be a Toucan crossing Loop Road 20 years. 20.
Oh, comma.
Sorry.
Toucan crossing.
Yeah, Toucan crossing
is there. In fact, I'll do it on the one that's proposed. It's there. The Toucan crossing across.
Sorry, does the Toucan crossing bleep or flash or?
The Toucan crossing.
Does it bleep?
Does flash and bleep.
Just wondered how close it was to any properties, because it'd be really frustrating if it's bleeping when people are crossing and cyclists are crossing. I just wondered where it was.
It's here, up on Brixham Road. It's to provide access to White Rock Primary School and into the site. When this becomes a school, vice versa, people can come from outside the area. So you can cross Brixham Road safely with small children. It's actually there.
So does that back onto Steed Close in Hook Hills then?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. I just wondered if I've had one or two comments from residents in Steed Close worried about this crossing, which is going to be right behind their back garden, especially if it bleeps. I know that's not the right technical term, but it makes a noise.
Yes, of course they do that so that people who are visually impaired know it's time to cross. I don't know if they can turn it down. I don't know. I've experienced in visiting Japan where they have birdsong instead, which is a lot more pleasant. But I don't know if there's something highways can do with the tone. Does anyone know?
I don't know that, Councillor Mills, but I suppose you have to make that weighing up factor about safety of people crossing and children with that potential sort of disturbance. And I know clearly that the safety of people crossing the highway would be our fundamental concern.
But visually impaired, there's actually a triangle and a little cone underneath it that twiddles. That's another technical term. So, I mean, obviously they don't need to listen because they can hold the twiddle. But I just was thinking how residents in Steed Close would feel with that I just thought I'd throw that into the mix.
Yeah, that was agreed under the outline permission, though. That's been approved by the Inspector
Oh, right,
Appeal.
okay.
So
I know who to, I can pass the buck to somebody else now. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you, Chair. The allotments. So have we got, at what point do the allotments come into use? Have we got, is it a number of houses to be built first? Is there a condition on the allotments?
they're in phase 1. There wasn't anything in the outline permission requiring phasing, but I've put a phasing condition in for that.
Sorry, it's okay.
A lot
I think
of
we've
the soil,
got, so it will be, they will come into use with the first phase.
they might not all be taken up in the first phase, though. Not everybody wants one.
Sorry, can I just jump in there? It says that the ground must be prepared prior to the first occupation of the 50th dwelling in phase 1.
Yes, that's the phasing I've proposed through that condition.
So I just want to check. So, but for within the first phase, there will be allotments available for use. That's what I'm trying to get at, I think.
Down to it. Prior to the first occupation, we should have details of the fencing, and the allotments will be laid out and provided in accordance with the approved plans, and the ground prepared prior to first occupation of the 50th dwelling in phase 1, as defined on the approved phasing plan. Management provided. Do you wish to insert the words provided for the use of residents? For the use of residents, yeah.
Yeah, so that it is actually available for use. One more question, if I may.
You can rephrase
Can we also make a request? I asked earlier about the energy statements for each phase. Can we actually request, as we go into each phase, specify what's going into which houses within that phase, so that we know?
But information be provided to us of what's...
Sorry?
Of each phase, yes, isn't that what condition 8
Yeah, condition 8 specifically refers to demonstrating what will be on each building, and then there's some detail about how those solar panels will fit, so they're not protruding too far and things, and that we'll get details of each individual unit at each phase.
Well, I don't know if I'm getting slightly confused. I know it's evening and my brain shuts down a bit towards the end of the day, but I was asking earlier about what was on each house within the first phase, and you said you weren't sure, but if that condition there states that we find out what is on there, should we not know at this point what's going into the first phase?
It's a detail to be submitted. We know we haven't got all the details for the first phase yet. We haven't got the lighting strategy. That's subject of a condition on the outline permission. This is one where the details will be submitted further to the condition on the reserved matters application. So they'll run in. We'll be looking for the details to be submitted before they go above slab level. So it's asking for those details once the foundations have been dug, before they go above ground level. We want to know what's going to be on the roof before they go above ground level.
My understanding is that before that, the wording is that it's before you even start on the ground level. So maybe that's my misunderstanding of what's being said. I thought it was as you went to each phase. We know the number of houses, we know the types of houses, we know the material of the houses, but we don't know the energy efficiency of the houses. That's what I'm asking, is that we have that detail as
Yes.
we have the detail at the moment on materials, layout, you know, that type of thing. I don't think that's...
Before they get above slab level. So they'll know what the walls are made of. They'll know... They'll be submitting to us, before they go above ground, what the fabric first construction techniques and methods and materials will be. And they'll be wiring in for the air source heat pump and wiring up for any that have photovoltaic panels. But we need to see those details before they go above slab level. If we haven't got them, they won't be authorised to go above slab level.
Okay, so that's a condition then for the planning department to see, and obviously not the committee then.
Yes, but we'd be looking for compliance with what they've submitted, so within the parameters of what they've submitted, yes. So no, we don't know, but we don't know how many houses and we don't know where those panels would be. But we will do once they get to slab level.
All I will say is I'm a little bit disappointed because the first phase is actually coming forward quite quickly. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more detail in that respect of the first phase coming through, so we get a flavour of what is possibly coming at later phases and we understand what's coming forward. But that's what I'm saying. I'm just disappointed that we're not able to see that at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Totally agree. I'm a bit concerned about that as well. I think this is what we're here to do, the detail. Okay, a couple of questions. Under the ecological mitigation works, how does the ripping out or the pulling out of the hedge along the Brixham Road accord with the mitigation works that were previously approved? I mean, it was agreed at outline, but it's changed. So how does that? How does that accord?
It's in the overall scheme. It was approved implicitly at outline.
But it's changed. Because we haven't got one now, have we?
We haven't what?
But it's changed, hasn't it? Because the hedges have all been ripped out now.
The hedgerows that have been removed are going to be replaced. And this was dealt with under the variation application. And it's also part of the landscaping scheme here, where, let's go to the, this one. In the landscaping plans, this is a hedgerow. This is a hedgerow. It goes all the way around here. It has trees planted in it at intervals. That's part of the landscaping proposal. That's not shown on this plan, but that's what's intended in the landscaping scheme. And these trees planted along here are birch and hornbeam, actually within the site. So within the it's all within the application site, but bordering the highway, this hedgerow will be replaced. And additional trees planted inside the site. If we go up, not that one, this one. So not included in this part of the plan. This will also be replaced. This hedgerow is being replanted around here to join up with this one. And this hedgerow is kept, actually. It's just where plants go missing, they'll be replaced. It's part of the planting scheme. Right. Agreed as part of the highway works and some of it on-site works.
Okay.
This is not... The ones on the highway are not part of this application. The ones on the site are.
Right. There was a little bit of discrepancy earlier when you talked about who was going to manage the site with the trees and the hedges and everything, you said that it was either going to be Torquay Council or it was going to be the developers or whoever was managing the site. The trouble is that we've had issues like this before, whereas Torquay Council say nothing to do with me and we're not going to manage it, and the site say no, we've built everything now, we've moved off and we're not taking responsibility either. And so it's basically then a bit of a tussle as to who is responsible. And
Okay, the section 106 in the schedule that defines the management entity does specify that they'll be responsible for managing the open space
right.
and the allotments and the orchards. So it's been identified that a management entity will be set up. That's a requirement of section 106. Details, I'm sure, are being prepared now. It's supposed to be submitted to us before or at commencement of development so that we know what form that management entity will take. And yeah, I haven't got a copy of section 106 open, but
and the hedges that go around the outside, because we've talked about what's going on the inside, but then what borders it? Who's going to be responsible for that one? Is that Torquay Council or is that going to be the?
Yeah, where they're on the highway, they'll be maintained by highways. Generally, minimal maintenance by highways. Just sort of let it grow, but make sure it doesn't interfere with the passage of the transport. Within the site, there's the responsibility of the management entity.
Right. Okay. And just
under the control of the LEMP, and so our landscape consultant was quite keen to include in the condition about the LEMP that any hedgerows that are perfect for layering should be identified as part of the LEMP review process, and that work be implemented.
Okay, it's just obviously I'm just trying to offset any problems
yes,
that's going to happen down
sure
the line, because
there aren't any holes
we
in the
are
nets,
fighting
yes.
it, in a couple of areas in my ward where it is still an issue, and I'm just trying to offset it. And just one other question. We talk about allotments. Do we know how many there are expected to be?
Well, that
I don't think
area,
there's a number, is there?
The area is as specified in the section 106, which is like, sorry, I can't remember, 4,000 square metres or something. In this plan, it's been divided into 17. 17.
17.
Yes.
Thank God, I thought 17. Okay.
With 17 a hut. 17 allotments.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if for example, the first phase moves in and they take up, I mean, unlikely probably, but they take up all those 17 allotments, and then by the time the second, the third, and whatever phase comes in, those allotments could all be taken, I guess.
It's possible.
So then the allocation is gone.
I suppose that's up to the management entity to
Okay.
phase the release of the allotments.
Right.
But
Okay.
I don't, it's not specified.
It's just, all right, thank you.
Councillor Hill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It was mentioned about the AONB and greenhouses, conditions being put in that has got to come back to planning and lighting and the such. Is there going to be a covenant placed upon the properties, those that are owned, not the social housing ones, to prevent any development on their own land, because there'd be restricted covenants? Because if you're going to stop it when it's planned,
Yes, I
how
don't
are you
know
going to
about.
continue it?
I don't know about restrictive covenants, but condition 27 is the one David just mentioned about removing permitted development rights for class A to F, which is basically householder extensions and alterations. That includes house extensions, roof extensions. Help.
And
porches,
when a
outbuildings.
When a solicitor is acting for you purchasing one of those properties, they are required to be part of their due diligence of looking at what you're buying to indicate that there are restrictive conditions on that permission. So it is meant to be pointed out at that very early stage by the solicitors acting for you purchasing the property.
Which wouldn't prevent you applying
No.
to do
Not
works,
applying,
any
no.
adaptation works that you wanted to do, but they would then be subject to a planning application and assessed.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, if I may, just one further thing. Going on from what Councillor Thomas said about maintenance of lands and such, and is it the council or is it the developers? Well, we've got similar situations in St Mary Church, so it's widespread unless it's particularly specified. The council's responsible for this, the developers are responsible for that area ad infinitum, because it will cause problems later on. We've got properties that were developed and estates that were developed 20 years ago. This issue's still rumbling on, and it's not going to be any different from this one as far as I can see. Anyway, is it going to be any different? Sorry, it had to be a question, didn't it? Yes, it did. Is it going to be any different?
Will it be any different? Let me get my crystal ball. I think, as far as the planning authority and planning regime can, that those matters have been sort of addressed in that we have either a management entity as identified by the Section 106, which is a legal contract between the council and the developer, and therefore enforceable, shall be set up to manage these the grounds. The option does exist for the council to consider adoption, but it would need to be discussed between the developer and Green Infrastructure to see how and when that could be managed, but it hasn't been discussed as yet, but it could be. Sorry, developers sitting there going, what? But it's something we could enter into. I mean, if the committee feels that would be a good idea, it's something I can investigate.
Through you, Chairman. The Section 106 agreement has some plans indicating the public open spaces that are covered by the management company, so that's fairly well indicated. But what could be a possibility is for us to have a plan within the LEMP, the Landscape Environment Management Plan, that actually makes it clear which parts of the site are part of that and therefore responsible for the management company, and those that are outside that. And I think that would then be part of that discharge of that condition and could be a reference point for the future if anyone questioned which bit was which. And we would just colour or annotate it to make sure it was clear as to which was which.
Councillor Brown, first, please.
Yes, I'd like to say you've covered solar panels with the new houses and heat pumps. What provision for insulation with no energy costings at the moment?
The insulation is kind of the fabric which is done through the building regulations, and the new regulations for 2023 should secure a 30% reduction in energy use, and the ones for 2025 are intended to ensure 75% reduction in energy use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the management agencies.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, could you switch for your mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So is the Section 106 already agreed on the use of a management agency for certain parts of the estate? Is that already done and dusted, or is that something that is to be yet to be?
It's a done and dusted document, which was part of the original outline planning permission. So one of the schedules sets out that the management entity shall be set up, and this is what it shall do. The Section 106, that particular schedule also has at the beginning a sentence that does allow for variations, but they need to be agreed in writing with the council. So, and as And as with any section 106, there's always the route to do a deed of variation as well. So there are options for changing it if the management entity agreement was agreed that it should be changed, that it would be beneficial to all parties. I'm sure that it could be accommodated, but at the moment, section 106, which is the legal contract between the developer and the council, is that it should be done by the management entity, which shall be set up.
Okay, thanks, because I know that, and it's not just here, that nationwide there are big issues with using management companies. I mean, you buy a house, you own the freehold, and yet you still have to pay maintenance charges, which is normally with the leasehold, and it does encounter problems with regard to, you know, if you don't have a good management company and all these things. For me personally, I would prefer that, you know, that the whole thing is set up in a way that the council adopts it. If the council has the benefit of the council tax from those, you know, residents in an area, then we should be responsible also for the upkeep of playing fields, etc., not rely on management companies. I don't know if we're able to change that, but I'll leave that one to the head of planning.
If it's any assurance, the section 106 also asks for the developers to submit a ground rent agreement for the council to agree. So that kind of acknowledges that there is an on-cost, yeah.
It's also, if some of my colleagues from other departments were here, the commitment to take on lots of bits of land like this would just not be supported. And it's the case with local authorities across the country now. And that's why developers have been put in that position of having to establish you know, management entities like this, that local authorities didn't want little pockets of bits of land that then you know, incur huge maintenance costs and sort of problems and things. So it's partly a result of local authorities making those decisions about what they would and would not adopt. So, and I don't think we're changing our policy at the moment.
Councillor Mills, please.
I've just had another quick look through the papers. I'm concerned about the lighting because there's been a huge issue with the lights at Windy Corner being 10 metres high and brighter than most service stations in England. It doesn't really stipulate, it just says the plan will be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Is there some way that we can ensure that the lighting on the estate is not hugely damaging or hugely bright? Presumably it will come in writing to local planning authorities. So will that be the planning committee or will that be Mr. Edmondson's team who make that decision?
It'll be a discharge of conditions application. So it will be dealt with at officer level. There's it's condition 16 on the outline planning permission that sets a framework, a lighting framework that was discussed at the appeal. And there are certain parameters that lighting framework sets. Now, as part of this application, it's not strictly required that any details of lighting are supplied. However, we've had a strategy from a lighting engineer called A. Tuller, and that sets out similar parameters which are in accordance with the outline permission. And I've got a copy of some of those parameters on a slide that I can show you. But basically, it involves 4-metre high lampposts, directed lights downwards that don't shine upwards and don't shine behind them. And they've kept dwellings 10 metres away from the boundary of the site so that light spill doesn't happen into the dark skies area. So I think what I'd like to do now is show you what's happening on the highway. No, it's the other way. A photograph of the roundabout going in shows some of the lighting poles. You can see they're that high. Yes, you do need long eyesight. They're, I don't know how high that is, 8 to 10, 8 metres? Oh.
That's on the highway. What will
Yes.
be actually...
Well, these ones are taller because of the highway requirements, but within the site, around the loop road and on the small cul-de-sacs, would be 4 metres high, which is about the height of an eaves of a 2-storey building. There you go. 2.5 times a van on the highway. So I've got some information down here. The dark skies area is the darker hatching. The green hatching is the development area, and that has a requirement of, it's not legible at this size, but that also has lux limitations. So then the lighting strategy that Mr. Tuller submitted, the main sort of physical elements down here are lighting columns, are 4 metres high, and are placed within 4 metres of the boundary. Asymmetric pathway and bollards are not placed within 2 metres of the boundary, and housing elevations with glazing are not placed within 10 metres of this dark sky boundary. Okay. And the ecological advisor at Devon County Council was happy that this lighting strategy was in accordance with the outline approved framework, and he looks forward to seeing the details.
Thank you.
Okay, members, I'm seeing no further raised hands on questions, so moving to debate, and I'll go first to Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. For me, I'm struggling with this development. I feel that listening to residents' comments of, we don't want design similar to White Rock, then this is a mirror image. The density of the site is too great with far too many houses planned. My fear also is with the blocks of apartment stroke flats, the potential for antisocial behaviour is going to perhaps put too much pressure on our already stretched police force. These plans, which include allocations for a school, public house stroke restaurant, may look appealing, but the reality is we don't have any more details that these facilities will be built. So does that mean more houses in these places? Probably. I feel the design is not the best for these dwellings and feel that when we drive by, is this something that we are going to be proud of or simply cringe at? I just can't support this. Of course, we do need houses, but we need the right type of houses, and I'm sorry, but I don't feel this is it. Thank you.
Any further contributions, members? Councillor Kennedy, please.
Well, I'll agree with you to the point that we don't want those houses in that place, and that was an application that we didn't like to start with. But having had that decision made for us by a government-appointed inspector, we've got to go with what's been approved. The number of houses has already been stated, so we can't change that. That is not in our gift here tonight. Mirroring White Rock, I would say not. From what I've seen of what's going to be built, as long as it does stick to what is being said, I don't think this mirrors White Rock at all. I do know that the mitigation work that's been done by the developers is very, very good. None of us, especially as ward councillors and the residents, we don't want it. However, we can't stop that. We now have to work with what an inspector has told us we're going to have, and that is 373 homes placed there. Personally, I think, everybody has an idea that something could be better than what's being proposed today, I'm sure. It could be an awful lot worse. I don't think it's particularly bad. I think an awful lot of work has gone into getting something which works for that area. I hope we've gone through tonight this. We've had a number of issues on certain things, which hopefully we've ironed out quite a few bits and pieces. But I don't agree with you. I agree. Yes, we don't want the application. We haven't got a choice in that. But what we have got a choice in, I think we have to. I personally would be happy to approve this with a few additional conditions.
Okay, thank you. Any further to make? So I saw Councillor Hill first, but then I'll bring in Councillor Brown. But Councillor Hill first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been said that we can't question the number that's to be built. We can't question the layout and the location, but we can question the quality and the type of housing that's there. And along with Councillor Thomas, I'm not 100% in favour of what I've seen, but then it's like many things on planning, it's the personal views of what we're having to look at and what we're having to pass. And I'm not 100% sure I can continue to agree with Councillor Kennedy. I was at one point in favour, not so much now though. So thank you.
I saw a flow of hands. Obviously, Councillor Brown is first, and then I saw Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Mills. I'm going to bring in Councillor Brown first.
Right. I think we have to look to the future regarding this development, and I would like to second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. So once we get to that stage, I'll come back to you as a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, please.
This isn't, this isn't to say that we would accept anything for this, but one thing I think that we've achieved that hasn't been achieved in a very, very, very long time is actually on this site, we have got 30% affordable. In fact, slightly over, I believe, isn't it? Slightly in excess of 30%. We passed an application that was agreed in 2016 recently for a 4% affordable offer. Shocking. I was absolutely, very upset with that one. And what I will say, I think the designs, yes, they could be a lot better, but they're not bad. But at the same time, this is giving us a good offer in affordable homes as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I'd also actually echo Councillor Kennedy's point that, often in this committee we are confronted with very, very small figures, sometimes, as we've heard, single figures. So actually, for 30% of what is a large number to begin with is actually a boost to badly needed housing, affordable housing numbers. Councillor Mills, please.
Thank you. I have to echo what Councillor Kennedy has said. I actually did speak against the development when the inspector was reviewing it. I think the developer has listened to the residents. I think they've listened to both Councillor Kennedy and I think they have looked at White Rock and realised no way are they going to have anything like that. So I hope. So I would say we haven't got any option. It's been passed by the inspector. We're having the houses, and I think what we're going to get is going to be, I think it's going to look all right when it is finished. I really do. So yes, I also will be approving it. Agreeing.
Councillor Dudley, please.
So I was just interested in Councillor Kennedy's conditions. you were going to put forward some extra conditions, I think, in that, weren't you? But I would like to say, June, thank you. I think your presentation's been excellent this evening, whatever the outcome. Thank you.
Members, is there any further contributions before I go back to Councillor Kennedy? Okay, Councillor Kennedy, so you indicated a willingness to propose a motion as well as attaching some conditions. Could you elaborate on that now, please?
Yes, thank you very much. So additional conditions regarding the external lighting and the external paint palette that we spoke about earlier. Unless I've forgotten, I don't think you'll have remembered. Did I say anything else as well that you wanted to? There was something else.
The point about the plans showing the responsibility for the local authority and for a local highways authority and for the management company, which we'd cover under that LEMP condition number 16. And your permitted development one will be a variation to condition 27, which has got a bit more, we'll put a bit more detail in there. And we will be encouraging the submission of those renewable energy solutions for phase 1 as soon as possible.
Thank you. I think that covered more. Sorry, it's brain. I think that covers all the additional bits that I wanted. So approval according to officer report plus those 3 extras, please.
Just going to consult with the clerk to ensure that we've adequately captured what that condition looks like.
So from the discussions, and David, please feel free to come in respect to the wording for it. So recommendation 1 would be the planning conditions outlined in the report be approved with a final drafting of planning conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. A new recommendation 2, that condition 27 on the outline planning consent relating to permitted development rights also includes reference to external painting and lighting.
Yeah, so it's not on the.
Is it?
It's not on the outline. It's on this application.
It's on this application, yeah. Right? My mistake. So. Recommendation 3, I've put to explore a variation of the Section 106 agreement to require a plan in the LEMP document to clarify which parts of the site are to be managed by, I think we can put Highways Authority, the management entity and the council.
It doesn't need a variation to the original Section 106 agreement. We'll add it to condition 16, the LEMP about the landscaping, and an additional plan that addresses all the site in terms of landscaping and management responsibilities.
So recommendation 3, adding to condition 16. To the LEMP and clarifying, would that be right, to clarify the parts of the site?
And management and maintenance responsibilities of those pieces of land to address Councillor.
Right. So bear with me. No, so adding to condition 16 to the LEMP and management and maintenance of those pieces of land, would that be sufficient? Or would you like to?
I want the word responsibilities in there. I think that's important to a lot of the members. So.
In respect of the
future management and maintenance of those landscaped areas.
In respect of the responsibility for future management and maintenance of those pieces of land. Okay. So moving on to the last recommendation 4, as in the report, the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following the Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations.
Councillor Kennedy, you're happy with that?
I am, thank you. So that's
Okay.
my proposal.
Can I reassure you as well that with this application there's a planning performance agreement, and part of that agreement is the ongoing monitoring and compliance with the conditions that we're putting on here. So that ought to give you all some reassurance that there is an ongoing agreement between the developers and the local authority that will make sure these are adhered to. Thanks.
Okay. And so, Councillor Kennedy, just confirm that you're happy to propose that with those conditions attached. And then Councillor Brown, you earlier indicated a willingness to second. Is that still the case?
I wish to second, yes. Sorry. Wish to second it, Mr. Chairman. We do need more homes, and I do feel that, we must go forward for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Unless anyone's dying to say anything else, I'm going to move to the vote. So, members, we have a motion for approval with those additional conditions added. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So 1, 2, 3, 4. My hand to that. 5. Those against. And so that motion is carried. The application is approved. Members have been at this for nearly 2 hours now, so I'm going to call a 10-minute break there, which will bring us nicely to 7:30. So you can be back in your chairs, ready to resume at 7:30, please, members. Okay, members, we'll resume the meeting now. So next application to consider will be that of the former St Kilda's residential home, reference P 2021-0531. Because, well, I'll ask Mr Jones to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a presentation for the final two items on the agenda, which are items 6 and 7. And it's for the site of the St Kilda former residential care home, and it's for planning and listed building consent with the items intrinsically linked. So this is the first slide is the application site. As mentioned, it's the address of 15 Drew Street, Brixham, and the proposal is for the planning and listed building consent for the partial demolition of the existing care home and its redevelopment to provide 23 later living flats with associated parking, and includes the change of use of the retained villa at the front of the site to become a single dwelling. The list of building consent includes minor works to the retained villa to make good following the exposure of the elevation, removing the link, and the insertion of a timber frame and timber external door. So just in terms of some context, this is an aerial view of the site from the south with the H-shaped mid-20th century building clearly visible in the middle here. The aerial view also illustrates the residential context of the site with dwellings in all directions. And at the front here off Drew Street shows the existing access, and also the Grade 2 star listed building, which is within the site here. These two adjacent buildings are also Grade 2 listed, just for some context. And this is an aerial view from the other angle. So we have the entrance into the site here at the bottom of the slide, and the L-shaped Grade 2 listed building. And this slide shows a little bit clearer the small link area just here between the two buildings, and also the predominance of parking and hard standing to the east of the building just here. So this is just some broader context drawing out from the site. So we have the site just here, central. So to the southwest, we have some local shops, which is within around 300 metres of the site, here around the area of St Mary's Church. And just out of shot, there is a St Mary's Park as well, public green space. And back to the site here, just going to the northeast slightly, you have Brixham Hospital for context. And you'll just see from some of the roof forms here that although it's a largely residential area, it is interdispersed with public and commercial buildings. You can see here some sort of larger, more obvious roof forms, including a primary school just here as well. So I'll just quickly run through some photos of the site. And I'll sort of, a few just moving through the site here. So here we have the entrance to the site here, and the Grade 2 listed building on the left-hand side with its access to the front. You say the access here is boarded up following I think the previous use ceased in around 2017, about 60 years ago. You just mentioned the mixed materials here, so you've got the rear wing, largely render, and also brick and some cladding on the nearer wing here. So I'll just take you sort of anti-clockwise through the site quickly. So this is going down the eastern side of the building where we saw parking in the aerial context. So this is the wing at the far end of the site. And moving round that wing to the back of the site, we have the rear elevation just in shot here. Cantilever balcony, lots of window openings. And this is a relationship to residential properties off Garrow Close to the north of the site, There is a watercourse hidden here, quite a small little stream that is culverted in some places, open in others. And then sweeping back up the site and then turning back on yourself, these are the properties of Garrow Close that we just saw. And this is the lower wing of the H-shaped building just here, showing some context, the relationship to one of the properties of Garrow Close, which is accessed through a little private drive in a gap there. And then turning around, you move back up to the listed building. This is the rear of the listed building here. And this is a small link associated with the listed building works to obviously make good the exposed elevation and reinsert an external door, obviously removing this staircase as well. So the final photo of the site is just jumping outside of the site and looking at it from Garrow Close, from a end of a private drive. And this is the rear elevation fronting the watercourse here. And this is the two side elevations of the larger wings, just showing sort of loose proximity here to the property. This is a local plan designations map. I'll just locate the site for you though. This is the site just here. The red line demarks the Higher Brixham Conservation Area boundaries. So we have the listed building at the front of the site within the boundary, but the rear of the site outside of the boundary. And the blue line is a linear heightened area of flood risk, which obviously follows the watercourse as it spreads southwest to northeast towards Brixham Town Centre and the sea. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, just here towards the top end of the site, we have identification for housing on the St Kilda site. And just in terms of some context, harking back to mentioning about the open space, you can see its proximity to the Mary's Park and also some allotments and some further identified open space. So moving on to the proposal, as touched on at the start of the presentation, the scheme is for the partial demolition and redevelopment to form 23 later living affordable apartments and the change of use of the listed building to a single open market residential dwelling. So this slide shows the existing layout and the extent of the proposed demolition, which is the blue, the large 1970s building, and the smaller single-storey link to the listed building. So this is the proposed layout, and it also includes a comparison red dotted line of the existing building. So it's a replacement H-shaped building that loosely accords with the existing shape. The building footprint is slightly reduced, and it reduces from approximately 770 square metres to around 625 square metres. So it's moved, here we have a look down here, it's moved further away from the listed building, and with the reset building line around 4 metres further away there. And on the eastern side, it's recessed from the existing building lines here, around 4 metres, and the existing building lines on the further wing around 6 metres here. The rear building line remains as established, and the southwestern building lines are similar or just slightly recessed around 1 metre here. So there are 6 parking spaces to serve the 23 apartments. 2 of them are demarked for disabled use. And there are 2 parking spaces for the dwelling, one here and one here, so adjacent to that. The proposal includes the creation of a curtilage for the listed building, so there'll be a demarked garden and some privacy here, sort of reforming, say, some defensible space for that building. The proposal will provide 15 one-bed and 8 two-bed units contained over 3 floors. As mentioned, this will be a 100% affordable scheme. Just quickly, just going through some of the elevations of the existing. say multiple windows. Obviously, we have 3 stories at the bottom of the site, then a 2-storey central section, and 2 stories nearer to the listed building as existing. And just a couple of others. So that's the rear elevation here. See multiple openings towards the watercourse. So moving on to the proposed elevations and some context as well. Again, we have the red dotted lines showing the existing building. We have the gable here, and then just underneath the black dotted line which obscures it, this is the height of the existing central section here. So the top view, we have the listed building on the left, and then the eastern elevation of the apartment blocks here. So it's largely brick. There are some elements of timber cladding, sorry. As you see, set further away, around 4 metres further away from the listed building to improve the setting there. In terms of height, it's approximately 1 metre taller in terms of the eaves and the ridge height to the existing, and the central section is around 1 storey higher, so that's around 3 metres higher. But that is a thinner section set in between the 2 main sort of gable sections of the building. Bottom half of the slide shows the rear elevation fronting the watercourse and the properties to Garrow Close. Again, you can see this. See the recession of the building line by around 6 metres. Yeah. And then we've got obviously a mixture of windows, the lower half of which are obscured, simply to provide some privacy for the occupants in terms of reducing the intervisibility into these apartments, but also reducing the perception of overlooking to properties adjacent, although the distances to adjacent properties are considered acceptable regardless of that. So moving on, we've got the southwest elevation, and again, relationship with the listed building here. So there's been some movement on this gable end here. So we've had a balcony removed through the course of the application to lessen concerns on overlooking and loss of privacy. And we've had the extent of glazing reduced as well. There is a proposed condition for these 2 windows to be obscure glazed to ensure that they're, the amenity of the adjacent occupier, where the boundary is quite in close proximity, is duly protected. This wing further within the site is distanced much further away and is considered acceptable as detailed, and it does overlook a sort of a tarmac parking area, which is far less sensitive compared to this element, which was closer to the sort of private amenity space of the property. Lower half of the slide, we have the elevation facing the listed building. Again, we've got the lower halves of the windows obscure glazed, try and reduce that perception of intervisibility. See, this elevation is moved further away than the existing building, and there are limited openings on the existing, the listed building adjacent. And these are sort of the lesser elevations facing within the courtyard to each other. Again, following a similar format to the elevations that we've just seen. And just some 3D visuals supplied by the applicant. So we've got the listed building here, and this is just how it sits in as you enter the site from the vehicular access. So quickly running through the floor plans. So we have obviously, here we have a number of apartments at ground floor. We also have some cycle storage and some bin storage. So the access to the site is obviously from around here. So it's located in close proximity in terms of waste collection. So it's a suitable and well-designed position for that. So it's a mixture, and these are the upper 2 floors. So they provide a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments through the scheme, which accord with the space standards of the local plan. And just some indicative layouts there. So in terms of the listed building, see we have the existing link, which is to be removed. So there is some works to make good that exposed elevation, as shown here in the top right-hand elevation here. So they'll be making good in accordance with the building form of the building, then putting a timber frame door and door frame. So in terms of the key issues and material considerations, obviously they're outlined within the committee report, including some of the, just covering some of the key issues here. The affordable housing, obviously as mentioned, this is a 100% affordable housing scheme within the new build element, which provides a substantial public benefit. This, along with the shortfall in the council's housing land supply and the tilted balance towards housing schemes, moves the dial significantly in favour of the scheme when considering there is some tension within the neighbourhood plans reference to retaining healthcare use for housing on this site. As mentioned, it is a specialist form of housing, but is not a healthcare-based form of housing. In terms of design and visual impact and impacts on heritage assets, the basic scale and form of the development, which follows the established building, whilst also being slightly smaller in footprint but slightly higher, is deemed an acceptable response to the site. The relationship with the listed building is improved through the greater separation distance and through the creation of a rear garden and curtilage for this building. The materials have been enhanced through the course of the application, and the application will present a building that will sit more comfortably within the context than the existing. In terms of the impact upon residential amenity, as touched on earlier, some concerns about overlooking to the southwest have been addressed through redesigns of the upper gable within that elevation. And the relationship to the east, where there was concern about loss of light and outlook, the distance from the additional bulk of the development is considered acceptable when considering the distance from the building to the site. So in terms of the officer recommendation, the recommendation is as per the officer report with the addition of an over 55s condition as underlined here. So the officer recommendation for the full planning permission, P 2021-0531, is approval subject to the recreational pressures mitigation obligation of £3,240 secured via a Section 106 legal agreement, a completion of a nomination agreement to secure the 23 units of affordable housing, and the conditions as outlined within the report with final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the inclusion of an over 55s condition to secure continued use of the form of development sought. And also the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions and obligations. The officer recommendation for the listed building consent application, P/2021-0532, is in accordance with page 92 of the reports pack as per the slide. So the grant of listed building consent subject to the conditions as outlined below in the report, with the final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further conditions or obligations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Members, we have no public speakers, so we'll move straight to questions. Any questions, members? Councillor Mills, please.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhere in the report, you call it later living flats. Is there any storage or charging points for disabled scooters at all?
So I'll just go back to the proposed ground floor layout. see where I can zoom in. All right. So this is the ground floor layout that has the bike area and the waste storage. I think this is a plant area. So there is a wheelchair marked here. So I can see nothing obvious for mobility scooters, but I can for cycles, sorry. I cannot see anything on the plan for mobility scooters, just cycles on the ground floor plans.
Sorry, just thinking, as you say, later living, I think there might be people who live late who might need some help. I don't know whether anything can be put in or added or thought about in that aspect.
Yeah, I was just trying to double check the layout plan to see some of the things that aren't clear here. But I can certainly look at the local plan and seeing what we can deliver in terms of ensuring there is an over provision of cycle storage. So there's potential opportunity to, because these are double height sort of, this is a system that flexes down. So we could maybe reuse some of that space to secure both options, if that's what members would like.
Councillor Barbara Lewis, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's more or less on the same vein, actually. Obviously, there's 24 dwellings there. 20% of that makes it about 5 or 6 car charging points. Are there any car charging points? I haven't seen that in the report.
So the parking standards for this specialist form of housing would be 1 space per 5 apartments. So 20% of the number of spaces should be have electric charging facilities, which is what the conditions seek to apply. So it's 20% of the parking spaces rather than the apartment numbers. And then obviously the dwelling, the open market dwelling should have an electric charging point as well.
Okay. So there's 8 parking spaces for 24 dwellings.
So there's 6 for the over 55 apartments,
okay,
and 2 for the dwelling. The dwelling is obviously, their spaces is separate near the entrance to the site in that building. And then you've got 6 spaces.
Okay.
1 which is proposed to be demand for visitors. So to ensure there's some capacity there for people visiting the site. We say that the parking policy is 1 per 5, so it's policy compliant.
It is.
For over 55 housing, yes.
For over 55s. But a lot of people at 55 are still working. They're still working when they're 70. It doesn't seem an awful lot of car parking space or spaces for the 23 dwellings. Can we not get, is there a space there to add any more parking? Because if reading the report, it says on the swept path analysis that 2 of the parking spaces in the northern extent of the site which appear to be a tight manoeuvre. Now, if it's tight manoeuvre for 2 of the spaces, is that going to impede on parking?
Yeah, so we've had swept path information that shows that all those spaces work, and the Highway Authority are happy with that their concerns have been addressed in terms of the tightness of the layout. Obviously, the site itself is constrained, and the previous use obviously would have created a fair degree of movement itself. So there's no obvious solution to provide more parking. There's not really a policy hook to try and secure more because of what is in the local plan in terms of the type of housing that is proposed. So there's no obvious solution really to increase that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank
you. Councillor Jackie Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was going to be on the very same subject. that, you know, when you're most people over 55, even if you take perhaps the members in this room, you know, most are over 55, not all, but most are. And I should think that probably nearly everybody here drives, has access to cars. So, you know, going on that. And also really, if more people do have cars, is this not going to spill out on the highway and clog up that road?
Yeah, so obviously we've got to look at it in terms of the, you know, the parking standards that are in the local plan. Obviously we don't want to try and encourage car ownership and use, but we also don't want to try and present, you know, implications upon existing streets and parking. So we do have a scheme that is policy compliant, and it's difficult to obviously try and, you know, seek an over and above parking standard and try and encourage car use, you know, when we do have guidelines that they do obviously accord with for this scheme.
Yeah, that I totally understand, but it's not real. It's not reality, is it? Really,
I'd say to that, Councillor Thomas and members, that we, like every decision we make in the planning committee, we have to apply the policies that are live in this authority area, and that is the policy, as much as we may disagree. And to really labour the point, we couldn't refuse it on a policy that is our Torquay Council's own policy. So it is policy compliant, as much as we might personally disagree with that policy.
Yeah, and I think I started by saying I quite understood the policy, but it wasn't reality. I know that a policy is a policy, and, you know, but anyway, let me move on. Waste. An indemnity is required as it's an unadopted highway. But obviously, you know, they can't drive on it. It says in the report that the access must be kept clear. What measures are in place to make sure this happens? Because, as I say, I did read in the policy that there were several occasions when it was St Kilda's that they were unable to pick up the waste because they were not able to have access to the property. So what assurances or what measures could we put in place to make sure that doesn't happen with 15 one-beds and 8x2 beds? That's an awful lot of rubbish if they cannot go and collect it because there's a car in the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the comment on the waste may have been to do with vehicles apparently obstructing the site when it was disused, but obviously when you have an operating site, that should discourage unsuitable parking, so that there isn't anything specific to the layout proposed to manage that, but obviously you do have a clear access through to a parking area, and so obviously, you know, the general management of the site should manage that itself, to be honest.
So what you're saying that this was whilst the site was empty, because the report said that this is when it was previously St Kilda's. That was the problem, that they were unable to go and pick the rubbish up because they couldn't access the site. Yeah. And I just feel that in order for that not to reoccur, is there anything that we can do to put at the entrance to deter car parking, or is there anything there at the moment? It doesn't say.
No, so there isn't anything. There obviously is a change in the form of use and occupancy. So whereas you had a previous sort of single entity that you may have had larger vehicles and servicing stopping, or, you know, it's or one employer, this is obviously going to be a number of individual residential properties. So that itself has a different sort of character to it, which may present different movement patterns than a single care home, which is sort of more of a single private area for parking, whereas this has parking spaces and obviously a communal manoeuvring space, you know, to in and out of the site. Okay. So there is a change there that you would hope would present sort of less
I would have
conflict
thought it would have exasperated the problem because there would be more comings and goings, but I will about to you.
If I may interject, what I hear you saying, Mr. Jones, is that there'd be more kind of passive enforcement because you'd have individual people coming and going, living their daily lives, coming and going, and therefore going to be vigilant for anyone who might cause an issue. Whereas before, the way that building was being used was in such a way that there was less people with a vested interest to ensure that driveway was clear.
Yeah, exactly at that point. You say you've got a single employer, so it could either been sort of employees double stacking because they're all there for a certain shift and they don't have to move, but that may create issues. Whereas this, say there'll be a number of different households which will obviously have management, and if there are parking issues, say there'll obviously be some form of management there that will hopefully address that. But it is going to be a different character of use, as you say.
Okay, Councillor Brown, please, your question.
Yes, I just wondered, you said it was over 55s. Is this a ward and control development?
I think it's just a simple age restricted development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Park for people who's visiting people there. Do you have a visitors car park?
There's 6 spaces in and around the apartment building. One of those is demarked on the plan as a parking drop-off space. So it's proposed that one should be a demarked visitor space to make that clear. And then the others, obviously the other 5 would be for residents.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Members, any further questions? If not, we'll move into debate. Any debate, members? Please indicate. You were also talkative earlier. Okay, if there's no debate, then I will then do the only other option available to me and write a proposal. Councillor Jackie Thomas, please. Microphone, please.
Yeah, happy to move approval together with the conditions in the report. Thank you.
So, approval as per the officer's recommendation in the report.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Dudley.
Happy to second that proposition.
Okay. I don't think there's any need for any further discussion, so moves to the vote. All those in favour of this motion for approval, so that is unanimous. Fantastic. And of course, members, we do need a separate vote on the listed building consent. So again, can I have a proposer on the listed building consent? Councillor Jackie Thomas, again, Councillor Dudley, happy to second. And again, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Likewise, that is unanimous and therefore carried. So members, that was the last application of this evening. The meeting is closed. Thank you.